Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of The Independent Activist with me, Fra Hughes in Belfast. I'm honoured and pleased to be joined today by Father Dave. He's called the Fighting Father. He's from Australia. He's had a very, very, very interesting life. He is a very strong advocate for peace and justice across the globe. And so we're just going to have a chat about his life, his work, what's important to him, and maybe things that should be important to us that we're not fully conscious of or we're not fully up to date on. So I'll call you Father Dave. Welcome to the show. Go ahead, brother. Tell us something about your kind of ministry, why you joined the priesthood, what you're doing in Australia, and how you think it's important to have a global view and not just a local view. But you actually put the two of them together, which for me is real activism. It's not just what's in your own community, it's what's happening in the global community.
Thank you, brother. And you can call me whatever you like too. But it's been an evolving thing for me. I was had a bit of a rebel without a cause when I was a teenager myself. And I think I've sort of gravitated towards working with people on the edge ever since. I had my own conversion experience towards the end of my teenage years and decided I was going to become a priest instead of a criminal. And since then, I guess a lot of my focus has been on working with people on the edge. And I guess I'm best known for the work we did in the Dulwich Hill area here in the inner west of Sydney, where I was 30 years as a parish priest. And we ran a youth drop-in program. We ran a Get Off the Gear, Get Into the Ring program, focusing on kids with heroin problems, which was, we were like the heroin capital of the area. And using boxing as a way of form of therapy, in a sense, for working with young people. Young people who were angry and had issues with violence, and the boxing was like a draw card for them. And so we'd train them, work together with them, and we put on shows which helped fund the work, so it was a sort of self-perpetuating work. I think it was when we actually the drug problems in an area started to reduce, and I'd like to think we had something to do with that, I started devoting more time to interfaith work and to international peace work, which just, in Palestine and in Syria. So, as I say, it's been an evolving thing, but it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey. But yeah, it just started with working with kids on the edge. And, I figured if we're concerned about the kids in our area, we should be concerned about the kids in Gaza and Syria and other places as well. And just seemed like a natural evolution, the journey I've taken.
Yeah, tell us something more about your conversion. That's very interesting. It's kind of the whole on the edge yourself, maybe going down the wrong road, something came along, turned you around. You want to explain what that was and why you think it happened and why at that particular time?
Okay, look, it's not many people have asked me that for a while now, but I think when my mum died when I was a teenager, when I was 16, and I went off the rails a bit, and she had a very slow and painful death, and I didn't respond well, and I got into, I was just trying to be a tough guy, and that was when the Sex Pistols were big, and I was really into the punk scene at the time, and with my leather jacket and my chains all over me and carrying a knife in my pocket and just going down a very dark path. And it was very violent and racist. And there was, I look back at the gangs and that I was involved with, it was just a very, there weren't many prospects for the future. And I had a radical sort of conversion experience when I was 18. And it was really through a conversation I had with my father more than anything else, my dear father, who died 25 years ago now. But I had, I think, quite a significant religious experience. And after that, I thought, this is it. I'm going to become a priest. And I guess, and just started focusing on kids who'd been going down a similar path to what I had been. I always used to say I'd never met a kid who was worse than I was. And I think that's true. But I met some pretty bad kids. I spent a lot of time in courthouses and in prisons and been robbed many times and um, threatened. But I don't think any of them was any worse than I was.
That's pretty amazing. I suppose here in Ireland we would call that a calling to the priesthood.
Yeah.
So uh, you joined the priesthood and then you would have found your parish. But I'm interested in maybe some of the social conditioning or the reasons why you have heroin, why you have drug abuse, why you have antisocial behaviour among many young men, really in kind
Yeah.
of Western Anglo-Saxon society. Have you picked up any nuances as the way that is? Is it the state? Is it society? Is it the media? And I mean, where does this discontent and this attraction to drugs and escapism come from?
Yeah. It's a good question, isn't it? I mean, I go back to my own uh, years of anger and rebellion, and it was very much a feeling that I'd been lied to by
Mhm.
society. That the dominant narrative that you could live this great dream and become a rock star and have money and girls and all this sort of thing, and realizing you've been lied to, and thinking the idea of spending 50 weeks of a year inside a factory. The voices I was hearing from the punk rock movement of disillusionment and suspicion towards those in authority resonated with me deeply at the time. And I think, in a sense, that's been the teenage experience over generations for us here in this country, and I suspect in Ireland as well. Um, suspicion of those in authority, suspicion of the dominant narrative, and attempt to try and find something that's true for us. And I think with the young people I've worked with, it's not necessarily that level of disillusionment, but certainly anger at being part of a system that's not working for them. They're seeing other people getting ahead and doing well, and they don't have the skills or the intellect or whatever it is. So they lash out and they try other things and they join groups that are, getting them into trouble. It's always group behavior that's the problem. It's always who you hang around with. It's rarely just sort of individuals getting themselves into trouble. And that's why the boxing programs work so well, because we change their peer group. And all of a sudden, these young guys have got mentors who are, older men who are on the right track, who they respect and who are looking after them. And it just, it changes everything. Back to a traditional sort of mentoring pattern, something we were more familiar with in generations past, I think. Something that's largely lost, at least in this culture today.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. A couple of things you said there. You're touching on role models. I think
Mm.
maybe we're talking about the breakup of the social fabric of society. I remember from Thatcher and Reagan and neoliberal austerity and the trickle down
Mm.
theory of economics that a society's being created where we're consumers. So social society here anyway, where I am, I've seen it like slowly kind of disintegrate in front of our eyes. We have huge homelessness that I never saw even 30 years ago. Never mind growing up, you'd have seen one homeless person in Belfast, maybe 40 years ago. And now there's probably, I don't know, anything around 150 people, maybe 200 between the hostels and like living basically on the streets, and then they're attracted to drugs. And then you also have the failure of the kind of welfare system that kids are brought into care. Then they're abandoned when they're 17 or 18, kicked out the door. You're an adult, got to live your own life. I would see a lot of the people that are drawn to that type of environment, not violence, not gangs, but desperation and depression and loneliness and abandonment are the people who've been abandoned by the state. So I think you're touching on that. Poverty obviously has a huge input, and lack of educational opportunities or lack of money being put into the educational system. So if you're in a ghetto, if you're in a council estate, if you don't have any hope going forward, but you're brought up with this American idea that anyone can become the president in America if you just work hard enough. You know, any corrupt politician, billionaire. So it's fantastic the work that you're doing on the ground, and I fully commend that. So why are international issues so important? Why Palestine? Why Syria? Why what's happening in West Asia, or say Burkina Faso or Venezuela? Why is that important to someone born and bred in Australia who's working hard within their own community? When people might say to you, you know, concentrate on what you're doing here, what's happening halfway across the world is none of our concern.
Oh, and people do say that. I had a lot of criticism when I was in the parish in Dulwich Hill of people saying, "You've got enough to keep you busy here." And the truth was, for a long while, I did have enough to keep us busy there. I would say we're the heroin capital of the inner west for many years. And I had people ODing and on the church premises, and, thefts taking place all the time, and violence issues. So, there was enough to keep me busy 24/7. But I've had other things happen in that period. Though in 1986, before I was there, when I was in at the church in King's Cross, which is our red light district, I met Mordecai Vanunu, who you may have heard of. He came into our church one night, and we got talking. And then, if you know his story, he ended up. Oh, he was.
The nuclear whistleblower. Yep.
Sorry?
The nuclear whistleblower.
Nuclear whistleblower, that's right. And it came out one night when I was doing some Bible studies and trying to get him involved. He decided to join the church and started coming along, and we were looking at Following Jesus in a Suffering World, it was called, and we were looking at issues of global poverty. And I was saying, has anybody else here got an issue they want to discuss or could lead a session on? And Morty says, oh, look, I could do one on the Israeli nuclear weapons plant. And I said, well, that sounds like fun. He said, I've got some slides I could show you. I said, oh, this is a good session. I didn't take it seriously. I was in my 20s, so I didn't have a clue. And then, as we talk more, it turns out he has these photographs, or so he says, of a secret nuclear weapons plant in Israel. And this was Morty was a good friend. And I wish I'd gone with him to London when the Sunday Times decided to do the story on him and given him some support. I mean, I was very naive. I was in my 20s. I had no idea. I never heard of the Mossad. But boy, I discovered what it was all about pretty quickly. When he was kidnapped and secretly shipped back to Israel and put on trial, and then did 18 years in prison, 11 and a half years in solitary confinement. I was there. I always promised him on all the letters we wrote to each other every month that I would be there the day he was released, and I was. And bloody hell, I almost got myself killed that day, mobbed by settlers, and but I did get to reconnect with him. Anyway, it was the connection with Morty that opened my eyes to what was going on in Palestine in particular and that region. And so, yeah, it was serendipitous in that regard. And I became involved in Palestinian human rights work from the 80s onwards through Morty. And the connection with Syria is a little more difficult, but these things just happen at different times. And I bump into odd people. Actually, it was an Irish connection got me involved in Syria. It was, I can't even remember his name now, a friend who was running an Irish Palestinian advocacy network. And we were talking on the phone about how we didn't believe the reports happening in Syria. This is 2012. And then he said, look, I'm going to do the right thing. That's right. He called the church, good Catholic. He called the church in Syria trying to find out what was going on. And they put him onto Mother Agnes Mariam, Mother Agnes of Homs, because she spoke good English. And next thing, my friend had Mother Agnes on Talkback Radio in Ireland. And next thing, she was on CNN, I think. And next thing, she was fleeing Syria because they were trying to kill her. Anyway, and I remember he called me from Ireland and said, I'm coming to Australia with Mother Agnes. Can you put us up? And I said, I'll help organise your tour. So that led me down another path. And eventually, when Mother Agnes finally says to me, you're going to come to Syria with us next year, I said, of course. And, it seemed to me it was all laid out for me by the good Lord. And through that, I met Mary Maguire as well, who was leading that particular peace mission in Syria. And so I was able to join Mayreed and another group of activists there and experience what was happening in Syria back in 2012 and 2013. And then I kept going back there, sometimes with Mayreed again, and who I've kept contact with. But I think we made 9 trips there altogether before the current disaster struck. But that's another story.
Yeah, I know Maria quite well. She's a lovely woman, a Nobel Peace Prize
Wonderful
laureate.
woman.
Yeah, the leader of the peace people. Now, a lot of people would have had issues with that back in the 70s because we were having a national war of liberation and the peace people.
Yeah.
I understand that they wanted the peace and an end to the violence, but that's, to me, that would be like somebody going into Palestine saying, we want to end the conflict, but we don't want to end the occupation. But that's my politics, which is slightly separate. But I have a lot of respect for her. I know she was on the Rachel Corrie, the Irish ship, the flotilla, several years ago, and she was taken to Ashdod and treated quite badly, and then kind of repatriated deported to. It's amazing the journey and the doors that activism opens, because I've had a kind of similar journey in that, for me, Palestine was Operation Cast Lead, 2008, 2009, when they killed 345 children over the course of like 10 to 14 days. And then the attack on the Mavi Marmara, where they murdered 10 humanitarians just trying to bring wheelchairs and medical aid, medical equipment to Gaza. And 6 months later, I was on one of George Galloway's convoys. I was on Viva Palestina 5, 35 days. We went from Belfast, Dublin, London, Paris, Lyon, Turin, over the Alps. We went down to, it was Lyon, and then over the Alps. Then we went to Turin, Milan, Ancona, Thessalonica. Then we went into Turkey. And when we were in Turkey, we stopped at the gravesite of Furkan Dogan. Furkan was a young dual national. He was Turkish American. He was training to be a doctor, and he wanted to cure blindness in Africa. This is the type of people that were trying to get to Gaza on the Mavi Marmara. A young man who wanted to save the eyesight of people in Africa. He was brutally murdered. I spoke at his grave, and I said, a martyr has dropped the flame, the torch. Who will carry it forward? Then I left a gap of 30 seconds. And then I said, I would. I was hoping other people in their minds might be saying the same thing. And then 15 years later, I was on the recent flotilla there. I was on the Alma with Greta Thunberg, Mandela, Ty Hickey, and a few other people there on the recent Global Samud flotilla. So I want to ask you, where you find your strength? Is it a spiritual strength? Is it a strength of conviction? Is it morality? I try and base my decisions on right and wrong, not black and white, but what's right and what's wrong in a particular situation, regardless of the potential trouble or danger that it might bring you into. So where do you find your strength to do what you have done, the places you've visited, the people you've met? What keeps you going?
Look, I do a lot of praying.
Okay.
I don't mean to sound overly pious, but I do a lot of praying. And, and I feel I've always had a strong team of supporters around me who've, steered me in the right way. And I think the reality is too, I'm a fighter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a boxer. And for me, the boxing training it's a spiritual discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of my spirituality that to keep slipping the punches and moving and getting up for the new round each time. And, you get toweled down and then you get back in. And for me, the parable of the boxing matches, I guess that the boxing training gives me, it plays a fundamental role in keeping me going. But yeah, beyond that, prayer and support from the good people around me.
Yeah, it sounds like resilience is very much part of your character, and you'll get that from the boxing. You get knocked down, but you keep getting back up again. Hopefully, you don't get knocked down too often, Dave. But so okay, we'll just touch briefly on a few of the things that's happening, maybe in Palestine and Syria. But let's delve a wee bit deeper. What do you think are the reasons behind the conflicts in the background? I mean, why was Syria destroyed, in my opinion? Why is Palestine being occupied? Why is Iran under threat and attack? Why was Iraq, invaded? Why was Libya destroyed? I mean, nothing should be seen in isolation, which is where part of your strength is, as I say, putting the national in the international. So, do you have a perspective as to why this has all happened, why it continues to happen? Is it just history repeating itself? What happened to the Native Americans? What happened to the Native Australians? What happened to the Native Maoris? What's happening, to the Canadian Inuits? Do you have a view as to what's happening and why it's continuing?
Look, I think you're right in the sense that the machinations of empire have been the same throughout human history, haven't they? The sort of expansion, destruction, and colonialism. It's not unfamiliar. But I think in terms of the more recent events you're drawing attention to, I've noticed they're replaying that video, the interview with General Wesley Clark from 20 years ago, a lot more now, because it seems to be
5 countries in 7 years, or 7 countries in 5 years.
Exactly. It seems to be a prophecy that's been bizarrely correct. That, in other words, that the plan for the destruction of all these countries was the plan to destroy them all was made some time ago. And I do see a very insidious hand at work in the long term here. I think I can't but believe that there was probably a similar hand at work in the whole 9/11 incident in the US, that, back to the assassination of JFK and these things, that there have been powers at work trying to steer US policy, particularly in a particular direction. And I guess perhaps I'm biased. My experiences with the Mossad have made me see a Mossad agent under every, behind every dark corner. I don't know, but I suspect their involvement in so many of these plots. And it seems to be unfolding now that the plans of the Zionist ideologues for a greater Israel that exercises economic and political control over the entire region. It's playing out now, I think, very nakedly. I know one can be accused of being anti-Semitic for making these sorts of criticisms of the political machinations of these people, but it's not about race. It's about an ideology of control and colonialism that I think is insidious and destructive. So, yeah, I see a connection there. I fear for Iran at the moment. I was in Iran earlier this year. I love the Iranian people, very gentle people. I've been there quite a few times, not as often as in Syria, but quite a few times in the last 10 years. And God help us if there's a war in Iran. I mean, God help all of us. I think that really may be opening Pandora's box. That I don't think they'll just roll over.
Yeah, I was in Tehran myself over December, January this year. I was at a conference there. It was only for a few days. Yes, you'll get no disagreement from me. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but conspiracy theories are only conspiracy theories until they're proven to be correct.
Exactly
And
right.
the only thing I'll say about 9/11 is for people to check out the 5 dancing Israelis who were on top of a van on a bridge recording the attacks in 9/11, who appeared to have had prior knowledge of what was happening. We've seen a lot of stuff come out about October 7, 2023, about Israeli soldiers being stood down on the border post. We've heard about the moving of the music festival closer
Yeah.
to the settlements that were the target of the resistance, Palestinian resistance operation. So we're beginning to wonder how much the Israeli government and intelligence services knew when we're being told that both the Americans and the Egyptians pre-warned them for what was happening. And it appears that that attack may have been allowed to go ahead as the excuse for the total destruction and devastation of Gaza. I maybe want to touch just for a second on your. I'll mention about, for me, it is imperialism. I mean, Israel is a white Anglo-Saxon European footprint in the
Exactly.
Levant. You'll hear them saying publicly that America is the policeman of Western kind of society, if we could use that term, and Israel will be the regional policeman. It will be the power, military power in the whole of West Asia. I mean, that's practically a continent. You've got Europe, North America, Canada, two continents really, and then you're going to have this imperialist, colonialist, capitalist rape and resource theft of the Palestinian people. And for people who look at the Eretz Greater Israeli project, they can see they want part of the Sinai, they want all of Lebanon, they want part of Jordan, they want part of Saudi Arabia. I mean, that's the aim. A lot of governments are in power for 4 or 5 years, so they have like a 4-year plan, a 5-year plan. They probably expect to be booted out at the end of their failures of running the economy and running the country after their term in office. But the Zionist plan is a 100-year plan, it's a 150-year plan, it's a 200-year plan. They're working at it night and day, every week, every month, every year, throughout their colonial history from before 1948 on. So your interfaith work, now obviously as a man of faith, there are lots of people who claim to be the fellowship of the Christian faith. But you have evangelical Christians who look forward to the rapture and the end of the world. You have people who I would assume use religion for political, ideological, and financial gain. So you've met people in Iran, you've met people in Syria, you've met people in Palestine. Tell us a wee bit more of your own personal interactions on that journey in the interfaith community to try and bring everyone together as human beings living under not one religion, but like a humanitarian law that we can all kind of buy into, where you bring the best practices of all these religions together. So which religions are involved in your interfaith, and what have you personally learned from that you didn't have as a Catholic priest following your ministry?
I hate to disappoint you here, brother, but I'm actually an Anglican priest.
Okay.
I've
Doesn't
got
make
4 kids.
doesn't make you a bad person. You're all right.
Sorry, don't.
I wondered when I saw you had 4 children. I should have remembered that.
I've got 4 kids and I've been married twice, so I'm definitely not a celibate.
Okay.
It is what it is, brother. But
I'm an absolute Catholic, so I have no time for religion really. But go ahead, brother.
understood, my friend. Look, I've always said religion in today's world has 2 sides to it. It has a belief side and it has a tribal side. It's a question of what I believe and who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And no one goes to war over what they believe.
Mm-hmm.
We go to war because your people think they're better than my people, and your people took my land, and your people hurt my
Mm-hmm.
sister, or you know what I mean. It's always about us and them. It's about tribal identity, and religion plays very readily into tribal identity and can be manipulated by people, by politicians, as a sort of point to create tribal conflict. So I think my goal in trying to build connections with other communities, religious communities, hasn't been to try and debate the belief side of things, but just try and break down the us and them. I mean, it seems to me that was fundamental to the teachings of Jesus. If you remember, Jesus told the story about the Good Samaritan, and the Samaritans were very much the us and them. They were very much the them. And I don't want to go into too much, but the story Jesus tells about how the Good Samaritan helps out the guy who's left naked and unconscious by the roadside. I think the point of that is, being naked and unconscious, you can't tell if he's one of us or one of them. I mean, how do you tell a person's nationality or their religion, their identity? It's by how they dress and by how they speak. And in the story Jesus tells, he's unconscious, so you can't hear him speak. He's naked, you can't see how he's dressed. You don't know if he's a Jew or a Roman or a Greek or one of us, one of them. And if he's one of them, he's somebody else's problem. So it's this sort of, and Jesus says, then has one of them, the Samaritan, come along, help the guy. Okay, very abbreviated version of the parable, but the point being, it's not about us and them. Go and do likewise. Jesus says, move beyond the tribalism. And I see that as a fundamental part of the Christian faith, moving beyond tribalism. And that means moving beyond the fact that I call myself Anglican, you call yourself Catholic, he calls himself Muslim. So what? In terms of our tribal identity, when I say so what, I don't mean it's not important. I'm happy to be proud to be who I am and proud of my ancestry and my identity and my religious heritage and all that sort of thing. It doesn't mean I'm better than anybody else, and that's the key. We should be able to take pride in our tribe without thinking that our tribe is therefore superior to other tribes. And so, look, I've tried to connect particularly with the Muslim community out here. And, this was, for me, it started with the whole 9/11 thing, when there was definitely the us and them thing with the Muslim community. And just discovering that, no, there is no us and them. It's just us. We're all in this together. We may believe different things, and we do believe different things. I don't want to minimize differences in belief or differences in culture, any of those things. But if we can move beyond us and them, then we can take hold of our common values. And when we're all concerned about our children, we all want peace. I think, and ultimately, I find particularly with the Muslim community, we've got a natural connection on Palestine. We all want to see justice done. And so, let's not pretend we all believe the same things. We believe very different things at points, and we can learn from each other through that, no doubt about it. But let's move beyond the us and the them and try and work together on the things we hold sacred, which, like values like justice and freedom. So, I think now is such an important time to do that. I mean, if we can't do it now, if we can't do it over Palestine, then when? I see this it seems to me here almost deliberately there's been a division between the left and right of politics, that, the left wants to take control here of the sort of pro-Palestine movement, and the right sort of, are sort of being ousted. We're not supposed to participate in the pro-Palestine things. I think, for God's sake, we've got to move beyond us and them, whether it's political or religious or whatever, for the sake of particularly, for the sake of Palestine at the moment. I think we really need to drop the us and them and come together.
Yeah, I have to say the parable of the Samaritan is a perfect metaphor for what you're doing. You're not seeing the other, you're seeing another person.
Yes.
Another person in pain, another person who needs help. So I think that's perfect what you've said. You touched on something that I was just going to go on to, just in the organic nature of the conversation that came into my mind, that we have the rise of the right all the way across Europe.
Yes. Yes.
I I mean, I read something today that claims that there are emails between Tommy Robinson. He's a right wing
Oh, yeah, I
fascist
know. Yes.
in Britain. Funnily enough, his name's something like Stephen Loxley or Stephen Young and Loxley or something. He's actually of Irish descent. You know, it's the classic, the person who becomes uh, right wing and against immigration is someone whose parents were actually immigrants. I don't know if something happens in their childhood where you're not really English, you're from Ireland, we don't want you here. Something obviously happens people at some stage. But his connections with Epstein, he's recently been in Israel. A lot of these
Yeah.
people, in my personal opinion, are being financed and directed by the pro-Zionist lobby
I
and
don't
by
doubt that for a second.
and, and by the money behind it. I
Mm.
believe that they want a war between
Mm.
Christianity and Islam.
Hmm.
So,
Absolutely
so
right.
there was a case recently in Dublin where an asylum seeker, was accused of molesting a child, and a huge crowd gathered outside the centre, the hotel where he was staying, threatening to burn the building down, wanted him out, wanted to kill him. And somebody pointed out that when people in Ireland are molested by their father or their next door neighbour or the cousin or the stepfather, no one's trying to burn those people out of their houses. No one's
Yeah.
trying to attack those people physically, to bring them physical harm. And these people who claim to be protecting, we are protecting our women and children from an Islamic onslaught where they're going to groom our children, they're going to have Sharia law, they're going to have mosques on every corner. There was recently race riots in Larne, a small town in the north of Ireland. 50% of the people involved in those race riots brought before the court had previously had convictions for domestic abuse. So these
Right.
are the type of people that are being drawn into this. And I think if we're not careful, I can already see it in Belfast. You have a left it's a left right split, but it's not only on Palestine. It's on immigration. It's on anyone who's come. Anyone. It's actually. I would hate to be a person of color walking about some of the streets in
Mm.
Belfast late at
Mm.
night. I think it's very, 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 very dangerous. And if it's not
Mm.
dangerous, it's very intimidating for someone who has to cycle to work, for someone who has to get the last bus home or the first bus in the morning to go to work. So tell us about what's happening in Australia. Are you seeing the same thing? Why do you think that's the case?
I think what you're saying is fascinating, actually, because just my personal history, I've always been considered a bit of a leftist ratbag. Uh, well, if that's the term we use here. And then with the 5 years ago with the lockdowns and everything,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I saw a lot of my young people I was working with die,
Mm-hmm.
not from COVID, from suicide. I was very opposed. I was very opposed
Okay.
to lockdowns, the mandatory vaccination, all of that. And I actually ran on a freedom ticket in the last election, the two elections back now, against the current prime minister, who's a personal friend of mine. So it was a bizarre situation. But I ended up running on the freedom ticket for what was labelled a right wing party.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and all of a sudden, it's interesting. I'd had all the support from the Communist Party when I was pushed out of my parish, and all of a sudden the Communist Party ran from me because you can't associate with those people. What was interesting was, for me, it was the discovery that there are a lot of people on the so-called right wing of politics who are very good people as well.
I
People with real
understand that.
integrity and real values. You know what I mean? And uh, so, yeah, it was eye-opening for me. Just as
Mm-hmm.
I discovered there were, uh, through my interfaith work, discovering there were wonderful Muslim people around, some of whom are better people than I'll ever be, and just discovering that. Discovering too with the so-called right-wing rat bags, that actually a
Mm-hmm.
lot of very good, very principled people there as well. And I think, again, this us and them thing, where we're labeled into our tribes, and the way that's manipulated. politically. And I think what you're talking about with Tommy Robinson is a good example. We've got to get past the us and them. There are things on the right side of politics get right. In my opinion, the emphasis on freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly. I think these things are absolutely fundamental. There are things that the left get right too, I think, in terms of the push for equality. I think it's interesting if you go back to the French Revolution. I hope I'm not getting too far off track here. If you remember the catch cry of the French Revolution was liberty, equality, fraternity. Yeah. And they did a bloody bad job, didn't they? I mean, they didn't give liberty or equality, but the ideals were great. And I think the problem you got with there is that they're at odds with each other, because the more liberty you have, the less equality you have. No two things on earth are equal. If you have complete freedom, you'll have law of the jungle. On the other hand, to have complete equality, you've got to limit freedom, because, you need force to enforce equality, because it's not natural. So it seems to me the only thing that can hold those two in tension is some value like fraternity. And I don't think the French Revolution ever really had it. But I think that's where a religious groundwork can be so important in terms of holding freedom and equality together. And I think what's interesting, if you look at the great social movements within our own lifetime in the last couple of generations, where there's been both freedom and equality coming together in a way that has integrity and lasts, they've all had religious foundations to them. I'm thinking of the Indian independence movement under Mahatma Gandhi, with the enormous Hindu and spiritual support base. I'm thinking of the civil rights movement in the US under Martin Luther King, and again with enormous Christian support there. I'm thinking of even the Iranian revolution of 1979, which was peaceful until they came into power. And again, with the enormous spiritual grounding that had in the community, or the African independence movement, the African National Congress in South Africa, and again the role that the church played in all of that. So I think this is, for me, this is where we, the church, if you like, or people with a spiritual voice, have an important role to play in breaking down the us and them, and then trying to hold freedom, the emphasis on freedom and equality together through some sort of value of fraternity, of humanity. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent there, but I really felt that that's been playing out when we had all those protests some years back over the lockdowns here in Sydney, where they were bad. I saw a real growth in spirituality. I was being asked to open in prayer at rallies with tens of thousands of people at them. I've never been asked to open a prayer in a public rally in my life. But I think people were recognizing the need for some sort of spiritual value to try and hold things together. And I think we do need that if we're going to progress forward peacefully, with integrity, to build something that lasts. In terms of what's happening in Palestine, in terms of what's happening in Syria, I really feel strongly we need to be moving forward with energy and enthusiasm and with spiritual integrity. Sorry, I'll get off my book.
No. That's perfect. Very interesting. I agree with you about integrity 100%. Without that, I think it defines us as to who we are and the journey we are on. Just going to make a couple of comments and then wrap it up, Dave. Just like division is used as a form of control. So them and us is a form of control by the people who want to be in charge for whatever reason, be it, personal fulfillment, be it a power trip, be it money, be it financial and political influence, be it backhanders, whatever it happens to be. When you remember that the church at one stage was the only place where the only people who could read were the people who